Department of Children and Family Service, which I call the heart of state government. So there she is. I was looking for you.
Good afternoon.
I can check out the boxes. Yeah.
Marquita,
Good afternoon.
Marquita Garner-Walters, Secretary for the Department of Children and Family Services.
Oh, that's it. Good afternoon, Madam Secretary. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Yeah. Did I say good morning? I say good morning?
I don't know what you may have said good morning.
Okay.
It was a long afternoon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. It's been a long day for us. Madam Secretary, we are looking, I guess, just for an overview and update from probably the, let me see what I have here. Yeah, the human trafficking policy and procedures.
Okay, so you want me to start with policy and procedures?
Yes, ma'am, and then we'll delve into the rest.
All right, good deal. I think I'll start with how we investigate, because that seems to have been some of the concerns and questions from before. So when DCFS investigates a report and determines that abuse has happened, there are really two things we can do. We can go to a judge and ask the judge to let us remove the child. We can't remove a child without a judge saying so. We don't have that authority. Law enforcement can take a child on at any time, but we cannot. We have to go through a judge. So we can go to a judge and ask for court involvement and take the child into foster care. That's a serious action. That has a lot of authority behind it. It has a lot of clout. Parents have to work with us. They have to meet their goals. They, if they want to have their children back, then they really have to work with us. But if it's not the parent or their legal caretaker, the other thing we can do is to release or use the investigative information that we have gathered to give to other agencies for employment purposes. Like, say, someone wants to work in a daycare. We can tell the daycare that we have a valid finding on that person. Or another agency wants to hire someone in a program that's going to work with children. They can run through us to find out if there's a valid. So that's...
Hold on. Yeah. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Send it to Mizell.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Okay.
So you said there are two ways you can, when a child, and I'm going to back you all the way up.
Okay.
So when you get a call, hotline or word of mouth, whatever,
Right.
you have two ways, okay, and is that predicated on whether the report is on a parent has neglected or abused a child?
Yes.
So you still have two ways, whether it's a parent or whether it's not a parent?
No. So when we get the call, we have to determine if we can investigate it. We can only investigate it if it's a parent or a caretaker.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
So that's it.
So if it is, let's say, okay, it is a parent, then you can go to the judge and ask to have the child removed.
Right.
And it is. I agree. It's a big step. So if it's not the parent,
Then we refer it to law enforcement.
okay, and you refer it to law enforcement, and with the expectation, and I'm just going to ask you, because I really, to get to the heart of it, what do you expect what is your, as a person protecting children, what do you expect to see law enforcement do? Ideally, in the ideal world, what will law enforcement do with that?
Well, we expect them to investigate it when we
Go out and
get
see
to go
person to
out and
person.
see. And now remember that we work with law enforcement very closely. There are multiple times that when we get called to go out to do an investigation, law enforcement goes with us many times, especially if it's at night or if it's a woman alone. Back in the good old days when we had a lot of staff, we always send investigators out in pairs because our staff is 98% women.
Right.
So we rarely send a woman out alone. Well, we don't have that kind of staff anymore. So we have women going out by themselves all the time. So often if it's night or a rough neighborhood, we'll ask law enforcement to go with us. But That's still if it's a parent or caretaker, somebody that legally by law we have the authority to investigate. So if we're not going to investigate it, we give it to law enforcement.
And do you get I'm just jumping.
That's okay.
Do you get a response? Does law enforcement then call you and say, we did this and this is what we found?
No, ma'am, they don't.
Yeah.
Yes, once we hand it off,
It's gone.
we've handed it off and we move on.
The law enforcement doesn't have a relationship where they would then call you and say, okay, we found this kid, because that's not your domain anyway. So who would
Right.
law enforcement then call if they find a problem with that child? If it's not, and I know that's why I've got the bill this year.
Right.
With that. But like, who would they call? Like what?
Well, if a crime has been committed, then they're going to go through the criminal process,
But the child's where?
They may call us at that point to come get the child. If they are arresting parents, then they may call us they would call us then to come get the child. Not our parents. If they were arresting whoever, they might call us at that point. And I see
But the
Mona
child
moving
can't-
behind me, so come on up, Mona.
But the child doesn't go into foster care. The child, who's going to, the child would go back to a family member, or that's up for law? I think what I'm getting at is there a procedure for law enforcement? This is how necessary you are in the process.
Right.
So without that, it's kind of, it just seems like it's adrift to me. If DCFS is not overseeing all the steps of the care of the child and the recovery of a parent or some family for this child that doesn't, who's doing it? Is law enforcement just trying to find points of contact that don't exist right now? Okay.
Right. So Mona Michelli, Department of Children and Family Services. So we do have law enforcement agreements with the different law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And one of those agreements is that, and just like in the law, they are mandatory reporters themselves.
Right.
So if there are things, and we work with them every day. So if we refer things to law enforcement because it doesn't meet that criteria, and during the process of their investigation, they identify, oh, wait, this is an issue for DCFS, then they will call us back, and then we will assign it accordingly. So, for instance, in the example that was given a little bit touched on was, if we have to refer something to law enforcement and they get out there and they find that, okay, we have to make an arrest and there is no available caretaker or family member, they will call us. Or if it's an arrest of a parent related to certain abuse or neglect and they determine it is a caretaker, by law, they're a mandatory reporter to notify DCFS. And so that's where that gap is
So at that
closed.
point, is that child treated like a child that had been mistreated by the parent? Is that come into like a child in need of care typical process at
Yeah,
that
it comes
point?
through if we
but
accept
but the
it.
law enforcement has to hand that child back off to y'all right now. Is that how it stands
Make
right
the
now?
report back to DCFS for screening and
Right.
determination if it meets the criteria.
Otherwise, it stays under the domain of law enforcement and never comes back to you all.
Right.
Okay, that really helps me. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. So let me back up and ask something on a case that y'all have that's ongoing now.
Okay.
The mother was also involved. You know what I'm talking about, or is implicated, I think. We only heard about the perpetrator, but I have not heard, because she was with her mom, right? Initially? Was she with her mom? So how is that different? And then I guess the other thing that I want to ask while you're getting ready to answer that, so when y'all refer to law enforcement, is it wherever in jurisdiction is, that's where you refer.
Right.
So in listening to the colonel, that frightens me because it seems like there's a lot of gaps maybe in the local level. So if they don't get back to you guys, then oftentimes y'all don't know what has happened, and unless something else happens. What I heard from the colonel today gives me a lot of pause for concern in terms of what's happening on the local level. Would you agree?
There's certainly a variation of skill sets with different police departments, yes,
Yeah.
or sheriff's departments.
Yeah.
And as the colonel said, based on their size and their experience, and even if you get training on how to handle a case, but you don't get one, you don't ever get called out on that kind of case, you don't remember all that training. So, there's a lot of room there. But Senator, I'm not going to speak to the specifics of this case.
Okay. Okay.
Members, y'all know me. I'm an advocate. I've been fighting for rights of children and families my whole life and my career. But I learned very early in my career that it's not my story to tell, it's their story to tell. And I don't know this young woman. I've never met her. But it's her story. It's not my story. And legally, I'm not allowed to really talk about it because of our confidentiality statutes. And that frustrates me as much as it frustrates you. Because
when you say her story, you're talking about the young lady or the mother?
The particular case.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to understand, like in that situation with the mother, because she was with the mother. How is it that y'all weren't able to kind of step in sooner? I guess maybe.
Well, without going to specifics of that, case,
as much as you can give, because when you said, because at first
Right.
I thought it was because it wasn't the parent,
right?
yeah,
I understand.
Yeah,
I
but she was
understand.
involved, or
So the allegations that were against us was that we covered up or ignored multiple calls to the agency. That was the allegation made against us due to the political connections of the perpetrator. That's why this committee challenged the report to be made and the OIG investigation to begin. So we did not cover up or not answer calls because of any political connections to anybody. That's simply not true. Every call that we got, we addressed in a variety of ways according to the information that we had at that time with that report. So every report was addressed. I'm not saying we did everything right, but every report was addressed. And so the allegation that we just didn't take them or didn't do anything because we were afraid that somebody was politically connected is just not true. The OIG is, we're cooperating fully with them. They haven't issued their report yet, but they've given us no indication that they've seen anything that goes to a cover-up. But members, I want to be clear. When this first came to my attention back in August, I immediately called Mona and my team together, and we dug into this to get a real clear handle on everything our department had done, because we want to be responsible for what we have done or not done. And so when the OIG was called in to come look at it, that was great. We welcome them with open arms. We're glad they're there. Whatever they find, we're going to hold true to. But I went beyond that and called the Child Welfare League of America and said, will you please send social workers, people that know the child welfare system, because the OIG isn't a social worker. They don't, they're looking at, did we follow law? Did we follow policy? I want to know, what could we do better? Where were there places in our process that we could have done a better job, or that we did a good job, but we just couldn't talk about it? or that maybe there's something in our technology system that needs fixing. Maybe there's something that's in our protocols that could be rewritten or done differently. So we are fully committed to knowing the very best way, not just for this case, but members, this human trafficking issue, as you are all aware, is a lot bigger than this one case. And our First Lady has made this an issue. Senator Mizell has brought lots of legislation around this. We go to the same trainings and conferences and hear the everything that we can. We want to build the best human trafficking response system that we can possibly build. And I'm really glad that this case has brought the issue to the forefront so that we can really talk about not the case, but the issue. What happens to all of the young women or men that are trafficked? Because it's everywhere, and DCFS is not the sole answer to human trafficking. If we want to be serious about this issue, we have got to train law enforcement. We have got to invest in the people that work in the field. You said very eloquently, Senator Jackson, when you were talking to my colleague at JJ about how we don't invest. We start these programs, but we don't invest in them, and we don't take them to the fullest. It does us no good to pass great law if we do not have the services for the victims. And we do not have a comprehensive service array in Louisiana. We don't even have a deep and wide, well-trained staff within DCFS. We've got a handful of on human trafficking. We've got a handful of staff at state office that handle these calls, and that's it. So we have a screening tool that every frontline worker has, and if they suspect a case, they have a screening tool that they use, and if it pops, then they call state office. That is not enough. We are asking, and you will see us in Senate Finance, we're asking for human trafficking staff, but one for every region. One. That is nowhere near enough. But because of our turnover rate and our high vacancy rate, the staff that we had been talked about receiving, nobody's agreeable to try to give hundreds of staff back to DCFS. Senator Jackson talked about the years of deprivation and cuts. I will remind you, DCFS lost 500 staff.
Yeah.
500. They have never been replaced. We are still serving the same number of clients that we were serving back when we had that staff. Or more, and in different ways, because now we have these. Back then, we didn't. When I was here as the assistant secretary, I didn't know about human trafficking. That wasn't language that was in my lexicon, and I was in child welfare. We've learned a lot. We've uncovered a lot. So you'll see that request. But it's not just us. It's law enforcement. We need DAs that understand how to prosecute these very complicated cases, because these cases are complicated. They're multifaceted. They move between jurisdictions. We don't have a single point of entry for law enforcement, which would be a great idea. We've talked today about all the different jurisdictions involved and where does state police fit. One of the solutions that has been recommended to us in one of our trainings is having a single point of entry for law enforcement that when it starts crossing jurisdictions. So this, I just want to be clear, members, that it's at every level, and that we have got to have the mental health, the clinical, the clinicians that know how to work with these cases, because they are different and they do need some different therapies. And we have some in Louisiana, but we don't have a robust system of them. And it's going to be expensive to build that. We have, in fact, I have a handout.
Madam Secretary, before you go any further, just kind of going to that, and then I'm gonna go back to my initial question. Do you see any opportunities? Let me see. I want to say that. Do you see any opportunities of things that can be done that requires that's a one-time expenditure that we can actually do that can create or set up the infrastructure to do that? Is there anything right now that comes to mind that we know it's a one-time expense that we can actually utilize some dollars to create or set up?
I don't know if the training, I'm going to ask Christy to come up to the table, and we have a handout for you for some ideas of things that we think that we could do very quickly to get started. But I'm not sure about one-time expense. This because how y'all categorize things as one time. But we're certainly open to looking for those.
I would encourage you guys to do that. But before you start to speak, Christy, I'm gonna go back and just ask this one question. In that situation with the mother, to your knowledge, has she been charged?
No, not to my knowledge.
And who would have been responsible for that?
Criminally charged would have been law enforcement.
Okay.
If there were criminal charges, we would have found valid for child abuse, but if criminal charges would have happened, that would have been through law enforcement.
And so to this date, nothing has happened with the mother that you are aware of?
Not through law enforcement that I'm aware of, no ma'am.
So you say not through law enforcement with you guys now has, right?
I don't, there are no charges against her that I know of.
Okay. All right. Christy, and then did you want to ask a question now? Okay. I'm sorry. Senator Jackson.
Tell me about this request. You say you're requesting one per district.
We're requesting, so let me back up a little bit. Before COVID had done a number on our department like it has everybody else, I had talked with the governor about asking for 110 positions to put in child welfare. And we had agreed, and that was going to be in the budget. Then in the budget preparation, our vacancy rate has doubled since last year. And so the governor and I agreed that asking for 110 people while we have 400 vacancies wasn't going to sit well in any committee. So the compromise is 25 positions. And I say compromise because there wasn't nobody happy about it. But we're asking for 25 positions, half for extended foster care and half for human trafficking. And the reason for that split is because as we raise the age of foster care to 21, the kids love the program. They're doing great in the program, and more of them are coming to the program than we anticipated. And so to have fidelity to the model, Senator Jackson goes exactly to what you said earlier. If we're going to have a model, let's have fidelity and really fund it. If we're going to keep the program working right, we have to keep the caseloads low. That's why that program is so successful, is because the caseloads are very tightly held. So we have so many kids in the program, we need another dozen or so staff just to keep the caseloads in order. So we'll split the 25 between human trafficking and extended foster care. That will give us a human trafficking specialist in every region. They will not carry a caseload, but they will be the expert that we will train up, that will be available to the frontline workers there in that region as they get a case, to help them know how to process it, who to call, all of the things that we have learned through training as we've gone deeper. That is all, and go back to all staff get basic training, but beyond that, to really dig into these cases and know how to handle them best, we would have a specialist in each region to help case carrying staff. So it's a very small ask.
Go ahead, Senator Jackson.
And see, that's my concern. And I know you're doing all you can with what you have, but we need to get realistic about some of this stuff that's happening. I understand your 25-person ask, but this is my concern. If it's still not going to be enough, then we're still going to have children out there who are not taken care of, who may be being abused. And I understand you're under budget restraints, but this is what I see for too long. And this is, usually I'm screaming at you, but I'm screaming at us, is that we'll say, well, we gave you this last year. When you sat at the table this year and told us this is a minimal ask, but then we will expect you to do the 150% with that minimal ask. And when something happens in your department, we're going to come back and we're going to say, what happened? We just gave you 25 people. But I want it to be on a record. And when you go to finance, I want it to be on a record. Everywhere you go, I want it to be on a record. I need this amount right now. Budget restraint gives us this. We're going to do the best with what we have. But if you want the children of Louisiana fully taken care of, this is where my department was. This is where we were cut over the years. And this is what we currently need. Because I think that message is not getting out. And because we are transient legislature, that's what I'm deciding to call us, because I get new colleagues every year. I almost think about it every year, right? Not every term. That's getting lost somewhere in translation. I know that I'm not a huge budget person as far as, I want everything in the state's budget. That's not a reality. Matter of fact, I'm a little bit different. I believe that social programs should be a hand up and not a handout. And that, and I'm about to get on that spiel with a new bill that somebody can stay on, an able-bodied person can stay on social services for 30 years, right? That's a problem there. When a woman enters the system on her first child on social service programs at 18, and at 45, she's still on them. You know what I mean? And we got free community college, but that's my next bill, because that's going to free up somebody's budget somewhere. Because I think that's part of the problem, is how we're using our budget and not being realistic and getting people, promoting them off of social services. And so, you know what I'm saying? That's part of, to me, the budget problem that we have over the years. But let's go directly to you. Before all of these budget cuts, because I'm sure you've researched your department, how many employees have you lost?
The total department lost 2,000 during the general term.
Right. That's what I just said, the general term. Right.
Yes, I'll leave it at that. So when we were...
Oh, I'm going to deal with that too.
When we left at the end of the Blanco term, I was the assistant secretary. In the child welfare side, I had 1,800 staff.
Okay.
When we came back in with Governor Edwards, Dr. Hodnett, the child welfare director, had 1,300.
Okay.
So 500 loss in child welfare.
Okay.
On the other side of our house, the family support side, we lost, it was a total of 2,000, but some of the work was moved, like child care was moved over to education, child care licensing was moved to education, voc rehab went to workforce. So if you net that out, it was 1,500 lost. So 500 in child welfare, 1,000 over in family support. Now, to be fair, because I like to, I want to be fair, the general administration put food stamps online.
Right.
And so a lot of offices were closed and a lot of people were let go, because you didn't need an office in every parish, because food stamps were now online.
Yeah, although that now our offices is what they call when they can't get through online or on the phone.
Right.
So
now they call you.
I guess the legislative offices took over those offices.
That probably is very true, Senator. So
you know what I mean, with our one employee.
But that's the loss in this agency. And
how much have you gained since the Edwards administration? Because I know we went through, how many years of a deficit did we go through in the first 6? Because we've been 6 years. Because I know the first 3 years were deficits.
3 of deficits.
And so
we've gained about 200 total staff over the term.
So your net loss minus what you've gained back in this administration is what?
Oh, you're making me do math.
15 minus 200.
So 1,300.
1,300.
Yeah.
Now, how many children, and if you don't know this, it's fine, because I know you didn't know I was going to ask you to do math, right? I don't do math much anymore because of the calculator on my phone. How many children were you guys servicing Like, has it decreased or increased? That's the best way to put it without pointing a
Absolutely.
number.
So back during the Blanco years, we averaged around 5,000 kids in foster care on any given day. That number has dropped. We
Good.
average now around, what, 3,500, I think? 30? About 4,000. But the difference is now we have home-based services that we started building during the Blanco years but
Right.
went away. So if we do an investigation and we don't, we get called and there's abuse and we do an investigation and we don't think it rises to the level of removing the child, we stabilize the family with home-based services. Well, we've got over 2,000 kids in that program.
Okay.
And that's more intensive than if you're in foster care. Because if you're in foster care, we're going to visit you once a month at a minimum. But if you're in home-based services, we're going to see you a couple of times a week. And so there are more in custody and care than there were when we had an additional 500 people.
And I understand that, and I think that's the follow-up we were asking for. When it doesn't rise to the level of taking them, but something's going on, so you
Right.
need to do in-home care,
Right.
which is what I think we were asking. How do you catch that child when, okay, it's not abuse, but they're not sufficiently able to take care of the child?
Right.
Like, what if the mother has a kind of slight mental issue, and you find that he or she is not, she's not abusing the child, right?
Right.
But you find that child needs in-home services. Would that be a part of it? Like, you go out, somebody's complaining because the child is coming to school, torn clothes and all
Yep.
that. You get to the house, you find out the mother has some slight mental issues, but can get stable at some point. But you have to check on that child repeatedly. That's that in-care service?
Yes,
Because
that's
what
home-based
we've been
services.
asking for. But we need to, and I'm going to go here with everyone. We need to realize that costs money.
That's right.
And I think that's been the disconnect. And I didn't even know I was coming here to say that today, but that's really what I'm seeing repeatedly when I go to committees. We're asking for things that cost.
Yes.
And they are valid things, because we know that there are children in Louisiana that need help. But we can't continue to ask for things that cost and not fund those things.
I agree
I
completely.
don't want, and look, when you're wrong, when the department is wrong, I tell them they're wrong.
Yes, ma'am.
And when they're right, I tell them they're right. The bottom line is, this is about women and children. Children cannot take care of themselves. And although we say we shouldn't be responsible for them, if a parent doesn't take care of a child, I think that's just our duty. For me, it's a Christian duty. For me, it's what's ingrained in me. So if the state's going to hold themselves out to be the number one pro-life state in the nation, we should be about taking care of children. And if a parent does not do it or cannot do it, that's where we step in. And that's how I look at it. That's how I honestly look at it, right? So my issue is that we're underfunding your department. And sex trafficking, as we've seen in studies, has been, has grown in Louisiana. And look, Speaker Pro Tem, Senate Pro Tem, President Pro Tem Mazel, you're not overstating it. It's happening. And we need people to help stop it from happening. And we need to begin to network, like when the secretary is saying law enforcement, we need somebody trained in the DA's office. I understand, I practice law, I practice criminal law, and if you get an untrained, number one, I don't defend anyone against a child, because I don't know if you did it, and I don't sleep at night, right, unless I know you freeing. But the Lord better tell me you did it and you didn't do it. I'm serious. You know how I feel about. I'm serious, because that's something you have to sleep with when you walk out of there. But I've seen a lot of crafty criminal law attorneys by right doing their job. And when you have someone that's untrained trying to prosecute a child welfare case, a criminal portion of it, it is a disaster. And so I'm saying it all in the long way to say you're asking for these positions, and I know they're not enough, and there may be nothing we can do this budget year. But what I don't want to leave from the table is people thinking in any committee that they're giving you enough to take care of all the children in your system. And I know that's sad to say, but I think we need to make that a point, and we haven't made enough points about it, that DCFS does not have the positions it needs.
Thank
And
you,
that's a sad
Senator.
reality, but we need to say it. We need to stop playing around with it, because the truth is we're calling you guys to the table every day. We're fussing with you every year. but the bare minimum is given. I understand our state is in dire need. I know Senator Barrow, the chairman, asked about one-time money. Trust me, I played with it in the House a lot because those were the constraints we were under. But this is not about Jindal. This is not about Edwards. This is not about Blanco. In all their own rights, they were governor, and the people of Louisiana elected them. Whether I agree with everything they did or not, they were the governor at that time. We are the legislature. You are the secretary at this time. Governor Edwards is the governor at this time. I would pray that we find a way to get it right.
Thank you, Senator. And I believe that in every single testimony that I have been to at any table, whether it's in health and welfare or finance or appropriations, I am on record with talking about not the 500 staff that we lost just in child welfare. I don't talk as often about the 1,000 that we lost on the family support side. Much to the chagrin of that staff, I might add. They don't really appreciate that I don't talk about them as much as I talk about child welfare. Right. It is easy to quantify when you lose 500 staff in child welfare, what happens to a system. And we are not the only system in the nation facing this.
Right. Oh, I know, yeah.
And when you earlier with the conversation with JJ and with Secretary Summers, everything said about his staff is the same thing you could say about our staff. Our staff, we do exit interviews, and when they leave, and the number one reason they leave is not always salary, although it is salary a lot of the time, but almost as often there's no work-life balance because the caseloads are so high, and they're called out in, they're on call, and they're called out, and they have to go, and it doesn't matter if they worked, a 10-hour day, and then if they're on call that night, they get to go. And so in that 100 positions that we had asked for, we were really excited about doing some things like trying a night on-call system and operationalizing like hospitals do. Nurses work night shifts. Cops work night shifts. We've never done that in child welfare to have a night shift, and that was something we were going to try.
I think it's needed. Let me tell you, I don't know how you adequately respond to a call. You are a 24-hour service for children.
Correct.
Let's just put it out there. You are a 24. Now, you may not need your full staff. Cops doesn't have law enforcement doesn't have their full services at night.
Correct.
And they don't have the same amount of staff. But you are our 24-hour child welfare department.
Yes, ma'am.
But your staff are being called in the middle of the night after working 8 and 10-hour, 12-hour days. The efficiency of that wears on a body. No one can stand that long. I don't know how long I'll stay here. I'm gonna be honest, because you see me walking out back and forth working, and I make light of that, but that's the seriousness of it. And I don't think anyone ever gets to that point where we deal with that reality, that we're asking people to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day and then be on call at night. And I can understand extenuating circumstances that may get people on call, but no one looks at we want you to serve as a 24-hour welfare agency for children, but we don't have it set up that way. I would love to see a proposal at some point that sets your department up. We can't fund it. I know where our limits are, but we need to get there, and we need to start retaining staff. And I think the only way we retain staff is get to the point where we have that that night staff, even if it's a skeleton crew starting out, because I don't know how long I would stay on the job besides being a doctor, right? That I signed up for that I'm on call at night after working all day. You get what I'm saying? That I don't see any response services that, that the ambulance service is 24 hours, but they got a night and a day shift. The hospital is 24 hours, but they got a night and a day shift, I would just employ you to give us a model.
Okay.
That at least we can work toward, to make sure our children are protected 24 hours a day. And that doesn't mean we're not, I'm not saying we're going to be able to fund it. I'm saying that we have to put it out there. We need to deal with the reality of the model that's going to work, that's going to maintain employees, that's going to ensure that those employees are well trained and they don't exit the system every 5 to 10 years. Give us a model that will retain employees, because we're here every 5 years discussing this. We're here every 5 years discussing turnover, whether it's in this committee or another committee, whether it's in appropriations or finance. We're talking about the turnover of staff in DCFS. I would like to see what you believe in your experience, because you have more experience at this than us, would be a department that doesn't have a high turnover and that really takes care of our children.
Thank you, Senator. We would love to offer that kind of package.
Yeah, and I mean, it may not be, I just want to see what it would look like, but I know I don't want to work 12 hours a day and then be on call at night. I don't want to do that, and I don't expect Louisianians to do that for too much longer.
Thank you.
That's a very good point. Madam Secretary, do any other states have that initiative now?
We've looked at a couple. That's what we modeled
Okay.
ours after. So we had a plan, so we can easily show that to you.
Well, I'm just wondering if we can actually do a pilot program. I think it'd be worth doing in one region. I think it's almost necessary.
Let me offer my region. Let me offer my region if you want to do a pilot program. I still have one of my 5 bills. I'm in that rural area like Beth, like Senator Mizell, and that's the hardest area you reach because you're going, look at me selling my region. Let me offer my region as a pilot.
But yeah, but on a serious note, I mean, I know that you're being serious. This is a when I met some of your employees, I came there, and the workload, the caseload. I actually know some of the people, and I know some of them that have quit. Their heart was for the work,
Right.
but it was just too much, and so we cannot continue to do the same thing expecting different results. I mean, they are not workhorses. They're humans. They have families. But oftentimes they would work and then maybe on call and then have to go to court the next morning for another case. And so as you were talking, I was like, this really only makes sense to me. And we need to figure out how we make that work.
Okay. I'd be happy to
Yeah.
talk about that more.
Senator Mizell?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm really doing my best. Because honestly, we just heard Colonel Davis say there are 276 troopers short.
Yeah, everybody's short.
We still expect a trooper to respond when you call them. We still do. These are children. And I'm looking in this room, I see 2 men, because this is going to be called a woman's issue. But we are shaping the lives of little boys and little girls with everything we do well or do bad. And I think we've got a test case, and we're just got the elephant in the room is the child that was trafficked, that could not get a call back, that is so messed up. She's messed up. And we all have her life on our hands, as I see it. And we have an opportunity to look at everything that was done and find out what was wrong. How many points of contact did she have? Her mother had valid since 2008. 2008 on your question. So how many danger signs do we have to see to look at? Okay, this child's life is in jeopardy. It is, and I'm not putting it all on you.
I know.
I'm just saying we have an opportunity to. Okay, and I believe God uses things. God is using the torment that this child has gone through for us to make sure it doesn't happen to another child ever again. And shame on us if we don't look at, okay, I'm going to tell you, I want to have the confidence when I sleep at night, whether I've worked 12 hours or 8, that I've responded to knowing a child that's in need has been taken care of. I mean, we all want that. We want that peace of mind. So, I want to do whatever it takes, but I also want to have absolute confidence that every child is treated with the same expectation, that a child that's being trafficked is not invisible or is not treated in, and that's why, if we're going to have oversight for every child, we got to have oversight for every child. So when you and I don't want it to be we're an inquisition. I don't want it to be, God, I want us to all be on the same side. I want us to all feel like we're on the same side. So when you get a call about a situation, and there's a sex case involved, do you call the DA or the law enforcement? And I'm asking you that because I want to know then what do they do? Because I'm chasing a rabbit down a hole.
Okay.
Yesterday in sexual assault oversight, it came up. After that, I had that one meeting, another meeting. The auditor had a report on domestic violence, and they recommended that DAs and judges have training in domestic violence, and LCLE.
Senator
disagreed.
Jackson in the chair.
I'm sorry. So I really want to know, when you call with a child that you've seen or have had a report of sex abuse, do you call the DA? And I'm asking that so you can tell me what kind of response you get, DA or police. Monica.
I'm going to let the child welfare expert answer
Yeah,
that question.
Up to you. I'll let Mona.
Okay. So anytime that we have a valid report of abuse,
Sex abuse.
any
Any
time,
kind of
any
abuse.
kind of abuse or neglect, whenever we validate, there is that protection in terms of if there isn't immediate court intervention that's needed, that we afford the individual the right to appeal that decision as well. But by law,
You've already lost me.
Okay,
So
all right.
when you get a call on a sex abuse,
right,
and there's not a court involvement, so we're not doing a child in need of care yet. We just
Okay.
have the report. Mm-hmm. Then the person has a right to appeal it.
no, so let me
Take
back
that
up a
back.
little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, that's
Let me
where you
back
lost
up
me.
a little bit. So whenever we initiated investigation, if it's a sexual abuse investigation, then our protocol is to work with law enforcement to do a joint investigation. And so we work with
That's
them.
your local, not to interrupt you, but your local law enforcement, wherever the residence of the child is, you work with that local entity?
It's
Is that-
whatever the correct jurisdiction
Okay.
is. Yeah. So it would be if the incident happened in Baton Rouge, we would call Baton Rouge City Police or the sheriff's office. And so we do joint investigations. We share information during that investigation process. So, but our role there is to ensure the safety of that child that we're investigating. Our role isn't to look
Oh, you're
at
not law enforcement.
right.
Right. So you just, at that point, you've taken on the protective role of the child.
Right.
And then you leave it up to law enforcement to see what needs to be done. Is there a medical exam of the child that substantiates what the claim is?
It depends case by case, based on the allegation. If it's sexual abuse, in terms of depending on what the allegation is, yes, we would proceed and we use our child advocacy
Yes.
centers and refer for medical exams based
And
on
they do the
that.
forensic
So we,
review
right,
at
we
that point.
sex abuse cases go over to the Children's Advocacy Center so that law enforcement, the DA, everybody's there hearing the same thing.
So
And so the DA is there, but when you ask me if we call the DA, we don't pick up the phone and call the DA, but they come to the Children's Advocacy Center when the forensic interview is being done.
So they're actually there in another room and the child is going through the interview at that point. So they're hearing the testimony coming from the child. Is that what you're saying?
Law enforcement, and then who in turn works with the DA as well. And then depending, every CAC I have to say is different, and they have different protocols. So it's dependent on each individual CAC as to who participates. Will they do it with or without police? Will they do it with the forensic interviewer there? So each one is a little bit different.
So if at that point, who decides if that child's interview was valid, is believable? And I think I understand. Okay, the child goes through it. Does somebody have to say, okay, this justifies us moving forward? How does that work?
I think it depends on each situation. You know, in terms of moving forward, I think at that point, if we're involved, we're taking that information that we're learning and we're continuously, what we teach our staff is every time you touch a case, every time you have any interaction, you assess safety. And so based on the information that you're hearing at the time, is this child safe or do we need to take further action?
But I want to know what investigation toward the abuser takes place based on that. You're talking about, I know your role is protecting the child.
Right.
What action is justified from that interview toward getting the abuser in custody?
Yeah, so anytime that we initiate an investigation, it's not just the child. It is a comprehensive investigation that would include interviews with the parents, interviews with the children. To the case by case, everything's a little bit different, but standardly, that's what we do with anything. But again, you know, in terms of doing anything with the perpetrator, I think the secretary.
But you know what happens to him. I mean, I know you're involved with the child, but you've got to be aware of, okay, well, the father, whomever, is free, or he's not free, or he's on bail.
Right.
So even though you're in this lane over here, you still know what's happening in that other lane because.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where our working side by side with law enforcement. But I think, as the secretary was talking a little bit earlier, the teeth that we have or don't have, and that's where that comes in.
Yeah.
Our role is to investigate abuse or neglect and ensure the safety of children. We don't have the jurisdiction
So it's
or
got to
the
be law
authority
enforcement.
to do anything.
They're on their own engine at that point,
Right.
basically.
Correct.
So it's sounding to me that there's a big hole that I've got a bill on this, that law enforcement has to be better trained on. But I mean, you have, because this is where I get really, it's really, I don't know if you see it the same way, Katrina, but okay. I mean, when we see a child that's been validated abused, and there's like a question over whether the abuser should be charged. I don't know. It's to me right now, and Secretary Walters and I talked about this. We know there's a lot of trafficking victims. I don't see any traffickers being arrested. Okay, well, you can't have victims without having traffickers. You can't have a child that's abused without an abuser. So there's some disconnect, and I think that's the challenge we all have right now. Okay, we can protect till we're blue in the face.
Right.
But if we don't do something to stop the people that think they are free to abuse, so I think that, and I don't know how we're going to reconcile that. Like, you know, if we look at all the things in the case of the little girl that we see, and like, okay, how many points of contact and what should have happened at this first point of contact that was an opportunity lost? And I just don't want that on my watch anymore. I mean, I think everybody here, and people who aren't here I know are also serious about it, but they're not here. And I just would like us to work together to figure out, okay, how do we fix it?
And I completely agree with
Necessary.
you.
Yeah.
We have those discussions every day between ourselves of what can we do? What can we do differently? You know, like someone mentioned a while ago about, you know, you can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. And that's what we do every day. That's what our passion is. And we're not going to give up. And so we're open to ideas, we're open to looking at different things, but we also have to have the capacity, the resources to do it.
Are you aware of a state or an entity that does it really well, that does it right?
and I'll defer it to Christy. I think Christy can talk a little bit about
It's define
the
the
Texas
it, which part of it, because there are states that are doing in the human trafficking issue. There are states that are, because you've been at the same.
Well,
Texas is doing really
well,
good,
and I hear really
and-
good things about Florida. To me, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not to put some more burden on you. South Carolina told me their game changer was putting the child protective services over the trafficking victims, where they had, I'm gonna say responsibility. I mean, but there has to be, like right now, if you don't have to say the trafficking victims, and you don't, it's not in statute that it is, then we basically are saying there's nobody responsible for the well-being of a minor that's been trafficked. We don't have one. So that's where we are.
And
So-
that, Senator, goes back to Senator Jackson's point exactly. If we're resourced to do that, and if we're truly resourced to do that, that's a burden of responsibility we will take. But we cannot take it with the current staff ratio that we have right now, because we're drowning in cases right now. And so to give us even more responsibility without the resources and the human beings to do it, we will fail. We will fail. We can't take more. Not without more humans.
But how can you not take more? How can you say you're not going to take these children?
With
I mean,
who?
I know. I mean, that's that. I get that.
I'm-
In the role you have, and I think that's where that's like, to me, a teacher saying, "I'm not going to teach this class. We only have 6 pencils." Otherwise, the children have nobody.
Oh, take care. And I understand both of you's frustration, and that's why I'm sitting here listening. I don't think you're saying you don't take the children. You're saying that if you shift more, okay, but it's because I'm going back to follow. When you say you cannot take more, what roles are you saying? More roles or more children? Tell me what you're saying.
The question now is, we investigate if the perpetrator is the caretaker, the defined
Right,
caretaker.
right.
What Senator Mizell is saying is we should investigate them all, whether it's caretaker or not. We're already just talking about how few staff we have, and so if you want to, it's like we've got the door open this wide to
so
take.
right now, your department is defined for caretakers abuse only.
Yes,
Anything else is
law enforcement.
Law enforcement.
So if
if-
you want to open that door,
So you're going to need the staff.
Exactly.
I get what, and I
That's-
do
that's
get
what
that.
we're saying.
I do get that. I get that. And the issue is that law enforcement is short, and you are short.
yes.
So basically, your role staying independent while both of you are short, I understand has to happen, and that's why I keep saying we're going around in circles without dealing with the larger issue, which is the human capital part of
Exactly.
what's needed.
Exactly.
And human capital is needed, and I understand you're going to present to us 25 new positions, but you need more. So we know that when we leave here, we're still dealing with a human cap. This is the same thing I would fuss about past police brutality, because I'm never going to defund the police. This is the same thing I want to get rid of bad cops, not all cops. That's how I look at it all the time. Is that we would never have a state police class when I was in the House for years. No class, and people were just waiting to enter, and they couldn't fill the positions because we never funded a class. I think we went through 2 or 3 years of never funding a class. I remember that. And I said, you cannot put more state police on the streets without funding their class. We somewhat have a funding issue. It's the reality. Our state has grown, but our assets have not.
But we don't know how many kids we're talking about.
Yeah, we don't. I think I wrote down Well, I guess we would have to get that number from law enforcement. How many kids have they actually investigated?
They're not trained to look at trafficking, so how do they know the number?
Right. Well, they do have law enforcement right now is investigating child abuse. Yeah. And so that number we can round about based on the number of cases that each agency investigated this year. And they do need to be trained but I guess that's the issue we keep going around about, and it's just going to be an issue that we're going to sit at the table every year about until we have the definitive number on what's needed to take care of our children. And that's the only thing I can say. I mean, look, I know that there's no person in here, even the lady sitting with us, because I know y'all, that would not go save a child if you could, right? At that moment that you get that call, whether we work for DCFS or not. I know that, and the gentleman sitting here, I know that regardless of our capacities in our jobs, if a child was in need and we knew them, we're going, if we can go. But we also know that there's a department out there that needs to do it. And there's law enforcement that needs to be trained in it. And I guess we'll just put our heads together because, Beth, I just think Senator Mizell apologized that we need some serious legislation, but we need to be serious about funding too.
And, and just to go back to what Senator Mizell, you asked about, these children, do we take them? Do we still take them? And I think in response to that, our whole mission is about keeping children safe with their parents. And so if they are not safe as a result of their parents being neglectful or abusing them, that is when we need to step in, and that's when we step in according to the law. But if that parent is protecting that child, that's when we can't get involved according to the law right now.
I know
so
that.
I just wanted to
No,
clarify that.
I was a CASA 16 years, so I well know. And I mean, I had great social workers with my children,
Good.
except for one, just to be honest. It was Washington Parish. Washington Parish, these rural areas have tremendous need, and I mean, and that's where the light needs to be really shining with law enforcement to understand what happens in dark places is not always a good thing for a child. And I just, my concern, I'm going to tell you, my concern is, okay, we're going to give you money based on a guess of a number, and then you're not going to be able to find people to hire.
Well,
And then we're still going to have the same need. The same need's going to be there, and you may have the money, but doesn't mean we'll have anybody, frankly, respond to a call faster, or it's and it is, and then we're kind of running the same dog around the tree.
I really think one answer is this, and you said it, and it was your ideal, and it hit, having some type of night crew. You know what I mean, Senator Mizell? I think that would help because you don't have the same person that's worked all day getting up at night.
Right.
And I think that would help, having a night crew that actually works the night shift that could handle the overflow from the day shift as well. Does that make sense? Because those cases are assigned to them if they start them. And so I think it would help in dividing the work and also dividing the calls that come in. Because either you're going out on an emergency call at night or you're handling it first thing in the morning. Regardless, the same people are handling it. I would like to see some type of... Does Texas and Florida have that? Because you guys have talked about how well they're doing.
I'm not sure about the night shift, but that's what I've kind of been itching to say. Texas has an amazing model for trafficking. Now, I'm not sure it involves, a day shift and night shift, but when, one of the things we tried to kind of put forth today was some ideas about what that model does include. Because even if law was created for us to take all, that's not what other states have found solves the issue. And some of the most important services that can be available are the care coordination and the advocacy. And that's in addition to having your child welfare worker or your OJJ worker or whoever is involved, or even if the parents are still protective. The care coordination in Texas, I mean, those are the two things. Now, they have multifaceted. I mean, they have many things going on in their system. But if you talk to them, those are two of the things that they have seen the biggest outcomes in difference. And that care
Coordinator, and what was the other word?
Advocates. So what they do is they have care coordination, which is through their CACs. And when a human trafficking case comes in, it gets referred to the care coordinators. Now, they might still have a child welfare worker, they might still have an OJJ worker, a CASA worker, whatever, but it gets referred to the care coordinators. We have that here, but it's a very minimal portion of what's needed, and it's really in startup pilot phase, and that's the grant through the governor's office. And those care coordinators pull together the team of everyone to get on the same page and plan for the child.
Right.
Then it's also referred to advocates. Advocates in Texas, they're contract agencies, they're the sexual assault centers, they're the some of the CASA organizations, they're the nonprofits on the ground doing the work. Here we have some of them, the NGOs. And they provide an advocate to work with that victim. That advocate is available to the victim 24/7. I know that and this gets back to your comment about the night.
Go ahead, John.
No. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Where is the child through all this? Where's
Well,
the child living?
Well, in Texas, they have multiple specialized placements.
But see,
But
we
we-
don't even have we
I will
barely
tell
have
you
a
in-
place.
I will tell you, in talking to them, though, they said that they still have issues with their placements. Where they've seen the difference is not so you still need the placements, but where they've seen the difference is not so much in having the placements, but in having the advocates. And that's what I was.
The advocate is the where the buck stops for that child is with the advocate or with the care coordinator. Who is the person that says the well-being of that child is my responsibility?
Right.
Who is that?
Well, I believe that they take it on as a team. It's not just one person. And they don't have one set entity that is responsible, because if the parent's not culpable, the parent still has the right to be responsible, but they need services and support to serve their child.
Right.
If it's, a parent is culpable, then it is their child welfare still. But the issue is the lack of services, and that's where they have plugged in this advocacy model, and they've gone to great lengths. They've had it studied, they have standards for it, they have outcomes for it, and I think we've all looked at, even if we have someone completely responsible, to see an outcome difference, they have to have services that work for the child. So I really, we need both.
But right now, I mean, you're talking about way up here, and we're on those big Legos right now. We haven't gotten to the fun Legos, okay? And it's like I'm just trying to have somebody to call that's going to provide something for a child that's been trafficked. Somebody that has some oversight, and we're worried about trying to fund positions for you guys. And in Texas has trained their law enforcement years ago. Florida's had a mandatory law enforcement training 6 years ago. When I talked to a rep in Florida about, well, do you have, like an idiot, is your law enforcement trained? She laughed at me. We've done this 6 years ago.
Right.
We're playing with this until we even expect law enforcement to know what a trafficking situation looks like. And but I see yours as an ideal, absolutely ideal. If I thought we had it, all that, it would be, I wouldn't be worried like I'm going to leave here still worried today. I don't know, but I think that's something we can aspire to. But right now, I just want to know, and having DCFS say, yes, the C in our name means all children. The C in our name means all children. It doesn't have an asterisk that it's only these children. Then that could mean, that can still open up to where it means, okay, we're going to create this under the Child Advocacy Center and have a coordinator and shift. But still, there's got to be somebody that's holding all these under tiers accountable. That's all. I don't. That's
Sure.
all.
Sure, and I completely agree with the concern for who do I call? Who handles this case?
Who's going to give that child a resource?
My only concern, though, is even if we find a set person to call in, an entity to intervene, that entity is not going to be successful unless there's somewhere to serve the child that has the adequate services. So, and honestly, the care coordination and the advocacy model, it's not extremely costly.
Right.
So I think if we, even in an ideal world, trying to break out certain beginning pieces, because if you have one entity, that'll be great, but we're not going to see outcome difference unless there's services for that entity to then ensure the child has.
But nobody's advocating for any of that for a child that's been trafficked right now. Nobody come to a table. I mean, we do a broad trafficking this and a broad we've got, but nobody comes to a table and says our trafficking minors victims need this service, or they need this resource, or they need this is where. Nobody's doing that until somebody in some state agency, everybody's just their own little voice and way out there right now, and that's why. Forgive me, y'all are it. Y'all. You have the C in your name. We got to find the money. We got to find the way. But I can't say, let's let the Department of Ed. Who's going to do it? And I say that all the time to us.
Right.
If it's not going to be us, who's it going to be? It's got to be us. We're stuck with a mess. But if we walk away from it, who's going to step up?
Understood.
So I appreciate y'all coming to the
I
table.
would like to see a plan. I'm
appreciate y'all
asking
coming to the
everyone,
table.
because we're here every other month dealing with this, and I'm asking everyone to submit a plan. And I know plans are not free, but at least if
give us a flow chart
right.
of what I would love to see, and you're in the chairman's chair, but I'm
go
just
ahead.
I'm going to ask for a flow chart of how it is, how you'd like it to be.
Okay.
How would and I don't mean Texas, I mean a realistic Louisiana model that would look at how we never do what we did to that little girl, ever again.
I agree.
Okay,
I agree.
Can do
what
that.
I'd like to see.
We will do that.
Like in a perfect world, if you could have your perfect department,
Or at least Louisiana
Yeah,
world.
Louisiana
The
world.
Louisiana perfect.
You understand what I'm saying? In the Louisiana perfect world, that's what
That's
we're going
right.
to dub it. How would it look?
Yeah.
Employee numbers and everything, night staff. How would it look to capture our children when they are screaming for help?
Yes.
That's the best way to put it, right, Miss Beth?
Yes.
How would it look
I'm with you.
to capture our children?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Okay.
Seriously.
I really,
Thank
I
you.
I'm
mean,
going to
I
try
just
to
have a
follow
feeling you may have
the
dreaded to come
senator's
to the
notes,
table
but she
today.
is coming back
It's
in.
no, if I'm truly deeply honest in my soul, yes and no.
Yeah.
Because you have the same passion and expectation that I have, that Christy has, that Mona has, that our staff has. There's not a staff in this state anywhere that wants what you want more than we do.
Yeah.
So we're coming from different angles sometimes, but we're going to the same place.
But you know what? We should be all, I mean, at every level,
Yep. Yep.
every floor in this building should be a team and not pulling in different directions.
I agree
and
completely.
I'm incredibly worried about that. So, thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate what
senators.
said.
Thank you. And my team is going to slip out because we've got kids that have to be picked up from carpool, and so we're gonna slip out. Thank you,
Okay,
Senator.
thank you. Miss Latoya Porter and Miss Monica Michael, if you would both come up. We appreciate your patience
Her phone
and
died.
and thank you.
Her phone, no, Latoya's phone died.
Mine's
while she
died
was-
too.
Oh, did it? That tells you the meeting's been a long meeting.
It's been a long meeting. We thank y'all for your patience on this Friday afternoon. But I hope that y'all can tell from our being here on a Friday afternoon, the last Friday before session start, how committed we are to the issue. And so we are definitely committed. And again, I just want to thank you for your patience and staying so long. So who wants to start first?
I'll go. You want me to go? Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay, Ms. Porter.
Latoya Porter.
Y'all just left. I know.
Thank you again, members, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I appreciate being here. I am a provider, an advocate, a citizen, an entrepreneur, just someone who is really concerned with.
Oh, hold on for 1 second. Senator Jackson.
This will be my first time putting my disclosure on the record with Ms. Porter. She is now a current client, a pro bono client, so I am not receiving anything of value for representing her. And so I think I'm not excluded for taking, I know I'm not excluded for taking testimony or any votes I have to take this session on the floor regarding anything concerning you or what you're advocating for. But I am very cautious to put that pro bono representation on the record.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson. We appreciate you too.
I wanted to come before you guys today just to kind of give an update on how things have been going since the last time that we met, and also to kind of ask questions and hopefully get some answers regarding the internal investigation that DCFS conducted into the case of KM. As I sat here, I was really taken back. I understand systems and budget cuts and funding and all of that kind of stuff. But I think for me, the thing that I'm most concerned with is that it has not been addressed that a child for many, many years slipped through the cracks. And because she slipped through the cracks, she was hurt. She was sold, her and her sister. And now she has a lifetime of healing to do. I heard so many things just now, but what I didn't hear was how can the abuse of KM be validated on both her mother and her alleged abuser, John Mack, who was her caregiver and her biological parent. I want to hear details on the investigation. Did DCFS report it to Livingston Parish and Livingston Parish not move forward? If so, who was it reported to? Where are the documents showing that things were reported? We're all in, state. We know if it's not documented, it's not done. That's a term I learned from working with the state. Mm-hmm. If DCFS reported things to Livingston Parish, to state police, to any other law enforcement, where are those documents? Who do they report it to? I think that we owe her in knowing where the ball was dropped. And all I heard was a lot of, we'll get back to you in honesty, respectfully. I'm really concerned that the system that we have right now, even after today, after you guys so diligently, requiring an investigation and wanting more things to be on the record, that we are still dealing with nothing that tells us this won't happen again, and nothing that explains to us how this happened in the first place. We're talking about a child with reports that were validated by DCFS since she was a little bitty girl, that were validated before there was even ever a John Mack. Before she was sold, before she was raped, there were reports that were validated.
Yes, hold on for a second.
Because see, I try to get more and more involved in this. Before John Mack, this child was abused before he even came along. So you had the mother who was a caregiver. Mm-hmm. The child had validated abuse, and she was left to remain in the home. Correct. And I think that's from the law's theory of, and because I used to practice a little family law, and it was kind of too heavy weighted for me, to just do all of what you do and see these cases all the time. So we favor in Louisiana, of course, parents heavily. So she was left in the home with her mother. But there was more than one case?
Yes. She, even her grandmother, her father, her stepfather's mother, there are many people that reported before John Mack even came into the scene. Schools reported. There were reports on this child and her sister since 2008. Okay. And those are the type of questions that I want to know. Like, I hear that there is no cover up. There is something wrong here. If DCFS did not cover something up, then I want to know who they reported it to, where are the documents showing that it was reported, because according to Children's Code, those things have to be turned over to law enforcement. She sat here and verified that they work with law enforcement. Okay, where is it showing that KM stuff was turned over to law enforcement? And did law enforcement just refuse to investigate it? And then if so, why? Why was it never investigated? Someone has to answer that question, because we know now that we have indictments.
That question. I think we're asking that question, and that's something that whenever we're able to meet again, and it may not, unfortunately, because we're a select committee, be until the end of session, but I think that's a pointed question for the Inspector General's office, because they are right now investigating DCFS. And so hopefully, and I would ask Madam Chair Lady, and I know you will, I know you, that in our first committee meeting post-session, that we bring in Inspector General's office. They would have had time between now and June, whenever we leave session, 12th, to 4th, to, I want to put myself down here longer. They would have had time to fully investigate this matter. And we are working now to see who investigates law enforcement. So hopefully and I know it's a long time, but that gives them time to clarify this. And we will be on it just because we're not meeting. But I'm asking that our wonderful chairperson bring in the Inspector General's office to answer that question. And that we need to be very pointed in that investigation of what we are looking to hear from them on. And that whoever is the entity that's going to investigate those 3 law enforcement agencies be here as well when we figure out who that's going to be.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. I will. I'm absolutely going to do that. But in addition to that, and I know DCF is probably listening, I know this predates the current secretary, but I want to understand, because I still don't understand where that ball was dropped, and I knew it didn't do any good to ask that question again, but I am going to ask for the documentation, because certainly there had to be something on record back in 2008 when it was first reported. And what happened, and how is it that she was still with her mother? My other question is, because I want to know, how is it that her mother is not charged? I don't understand that, but I'm going to find out. Somebody's going to have to answer that question for me.
Also, I think that it also needs to be answered that there are others that KM has identified as being a part of her abuse. I would like to know if those things have been turned over to law enforcement and where that is. I received letters in the mail validating with DCFS that it met the standard of abuse, which means that they will refer it to law enforcement.
So these are the other perpetrators?
Correct. I have heard nothing about these other individuals that have been named, and that concerns me. Like, I totally respect that it is her story to tell, but she's not here to tell her story, and I'm going to tell it until I lose my voice. And I'm going to advocate for her and make sure that her voice is heard. I'm concerned that I have heard up until today when we were hearing about the Inspector General, I've heard nothing from state police. I was told to go to state police, go to the office, to the address. Senator Jackson made sure I had that address. I went down there, myself and Mr. Collins from the NAACP. We sat there. I was never even informed that it was having to go anywhere else.
So, hold up. Let's stop right there. So, when you left here, you went to state police and you filed the complaint. And you filed the complaint. Do you remember who it was against?
We did a complaint against Washington Parish Sheriff's Office, Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, DCFS, and I don't think we filed a complaint against state police, but I think they were, because they asked who all were involved in the investigation. My biggest concern with state police is just the not communicating at all on what's happening. Not only not communicating what's happening, but not really explaining to me how a parish like Livingston Parish can go on the record saying that they closed the case, but as soon as state police get involved, it's magically open again. How Livingston Parish can have a case for years and use this my daughter's testimony, because she's my daughter now, her testimony to file charges all of a sudden, now that things are brought to the public, but you couldn't file these same charges years ago. Someone has to ask these difficult questions. It makes no sense.
So I want to go back to this. You left here. You went to state police. You filed a complaint.
I did.
And what happened after? Have you heard
Nothing.
anything? You haven't. So they never told you that the case was now being transferred over to Inspector General because they were named in the case. Because if my memory served me correctly, I think that's what the colonel told us,
That's what he
that
just said.
because they were named, that they were not able to be a part of the investigation.
I have heard nothing from the state police since we left that office in regard to our complaint. I didn't even know that if that was the case, I would have figured out where to go to the Inspector General, because as you know, with KM, I went from parish to parish to parish to make the right police report. I would have went directly to the Inspector General's office then and made the complaint if I could have. I had no idea that it needed to go somewhere else. I think that the systematic breakdown of communication on exactly what is happening and why it's happening, it's just not making sense. And so we can say, this agency didn't cover this up, or this person didn't respond because of this. But okay, if it wasn't that, then someone needs to go on record and explain then what exactly it was. Because what we cannot say is that something did not happen here, because we are now sitting behind 8 indictments, which means a grand jury read and believed that what these 2 young girls were saying were true. We still do not have charges in the other parishes where she was sold and trafficked, and that is unacceptable to me. That's unacceptable. And I have no idea what's going on with the state police investigation. The last that I knew was that state police can investigate anything but Livingston Parish, and that baffled me. Why not?
What do you mean?
I was told that state police cannot.
Who said that? Who said that they can't investigate
Nicole
Livingston
Barbie.
Parish?
She said that she cannot. She can touch anything except things that are in Livingston Parish.
She works with
State police, Special Victims Unit.
Is she actually said that?
She did.
That's interesting. We need to know why that's so.
And so I would like. She said that they were doing their own investigation.
Hold on.
That's why I think in the next meeting, we should hear from the constituents first.
Yeah.
Because
I
what we're
will.
doing is hearing from departments, and then every time we get the constituents up after the departments leave, we find questions. Yeah. And so I think I would like to know the
Duly
constituents
noted,
that are
ma'am.
here for each item and taking them up first. If it's an continuous agenda item. I understand new agenda items we hear from the state departments, but these are becoming continuous agenda items. If they're continuous agenda items, I would like to hear from the general public before we bring up the secretaries, because there are questions that arise once they leave. That's just my request on the continuous agenda items.
I agree. I definitely would do that. Senator Mizell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I just something came to mind, and I had to step out. But when the case came to court, it was heard where?
In Livingston Parish. So it was 2 things. First,
Okay, that's what I want. I want to understand
Jefferson.
who
and
had the
Livingston.
jurisdiction, and okay, you tell, because you know.
So when we were trying to get her into custody, and that was another really big frustrating moment for me today, is because we were trying to get a protective order, anything to keep this man from coming to get her. And at that point, when we were able to get DCFS to take custody of her, they filed the in-stander order in Jefferson Parish, because one or a couple of the crimes occurred in Jefferson Parish, and that was her address where her aunt had lived, KM's previous aunt. And so they filed the extended order in Jefferson Parish. When state police got involved and began to investigate, they initially arrested Mr. Mack on charges that had nothing to do with KM. He only was charged with things with KM since the Attorney General got involved. These indictments came down, and this is the first justice that she has seen, because these other charges that have kept him in jail had nothing to do with her. And keep in mind, she took the brunt of the abuse. She took all of the trafficking, but no charges for her were filed until just recently, once the Attorney General got involved. Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office told DCFS told us that the case was closed, that Mr. Mack passed a lie detector test, and the case was closed. But magically, when state police gets involved, it's open, and that is why Nicole Barbie reported to me that she could not investigate in Livingston, because Livingston has an open case. But Livingston had closed the case. It's on record with DCFS. They told DCFS it was no open investigation.
Wait, because this is where I'm trying to take what we had heard earlier and what we're hearing now. So, what do you mean DCFS? Why would they tell DCFS? I
guess at this point we had really begun to make lots and lots of reports, and so
to DCFS,
and as well as the Children's Advocacy Center. She had a lot of concerns for KM's safety, because at this point she knew that she was getting ready to be discharged back to her family, and she knew what that meant.
The CAC had a lot of concerns. And the CAC, which one?
The one in Hammond. And so they had reached out to DCFS and asked them for a meeting, and we had a Zoom meeting. It was for individuals from DCFS in the Child Welfare Division.
Give us the timeline. So what date or a month or so was
August.
this? Okay.
This is August. That's why when she said August, it alarmed me. This was August. Shortly after we left and came here to Baton Rouge to the NAACP office. So this was August. And at that meeting, that Zoom meeting, they said to us that DCFS had no grounds to step in and take custody of her, issue a protective order, that when she was to discharged, that she would go back to her family. And we knew what this meant, and she knew what this meant. And myself, my staff, members of the Children's Advocacy Center, this is when we really began to kind of all freak out, because we knew that her plan was to just end her life, that she was not going to go back into that environment. DCFS at that time, during that meeting, on a Zoom meeting with many people, and it has been validated by Children's Advocacy Center and other staff that was on that call, Mr. Craig Miller from Child Welfare, he said Livingston Parish has told him that the case is closed. It could not be substantiated. There's no FBI involvement, and that DCFS has no grounds to intervene in the custody of KM. And when she discharged, she's returned to her family.
Because I'm trying to understand. We just had a conversation where DCFS said they do not take responsibility. Their oversight is not for a trafficking victim. So are they seeing this child as someone that's been abused or neglected by the parent, or is it as a trafficking victim?
Both. KM's case were validated,
so they're
because
doing what they're doing.
Her parent was involved in her trafficking.
But they're not holding the parent. Is the parent being held culpable in any way besides just
only on DCFS has validated cases against the parent for many cases.
She's not working a case plan or anything, is she?
Not at all.
No. So what? Okay.
Not at all.
So she isn't giving up her parental rights.
We're going through that process now.
For her to give up her parental rights.
I mean, she hasn't been. She hasn't appeared at any of our cases. I mean, court dates since the very first one. So we're still going through that system. We're still going through, like right now, we're going through where KM is, placed somewhere right now, which in my opinion, she should not be. She's for me to sit here as someone who worked with these types of kids all the time, and to hear them say that, victims of sex trafficking, it's very difficult, it's very different. It's true. So when you have someone who, like myself in KM's case, who has advocated for her, who knows exactly what she does, and when she feels like she's messed up and you're not going to love me anymore, then you have to allow those people to take care of them. because that's what we do. In my case with KM, that hasn't been what's happening. And so the process has been difficult because I think people don't understand like some of the things that these kids go through, the level of rejection, the level of abandonment, them trying to understand, you know, how can complete strangers love me and care for me when, you know, people that my family don't. That's difficult to wrap your mind around. Right. I'm mostly concerned about the fact that I need to be able to do a few things. I need to get answers. I need to make sense of what has happened, how it has happened, why it has happened. And I want to make sure that the people who have harmed her, watched her be harmed, participated in her being harmed, turned their head, that they're held accountable. I don't care who they are. And I think that we can say we did an internal investigation. We can say we did this, this, and this. I want to see the documentation. If you followed your protocol and returned everything over to Livingston Parish, then that's where it died at. Because I know that's where my report died at Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office. That's where it died. So maybe DCFS did what they're supposed to do. But if they did, it should be documentation of that, right? Because what I know is that we reported 12 plus times and not one visit to the office from DCFS.
I'm going to be done. At the end of the day, he is he's been convicted.
Charged, indicted.
He's indicted, right. By whom?
He's in charges in Livingston Parish and in Jefferson Parish.
So at the end of the day, though, Livingston Parish did hold him and indict him.
They did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it took what happened? What changed the whole that
the state
from a
police
closed case and now being indicted?
Right. What changed? What happened?
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't know.
And if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't Livingston Parish that did the investigation. It was state police that did the investigation.
Okay.
And the attorney general, because the district attorney recused himself. The attorney general came in and because initially the charges were only for her sister. The attorney general came in and did a very thorough investigation with state police, and that's how they got the charges. The case went nowhere in Livingston Parish.
But
nowhere.
What was Jefferson to do with that? Jefferson just kind of started it.
They started it, but that was also with state police. And that's why I said I wasn't really sure about what Colonel Davis said about complaints with the state police. My only complaint there is the communication or lack thereof and not knowing what is happening. I think that there was investigation because we got, the charges with her sister, but no charges with her. Somebody has to make me understand how that's possible. If you can use KM's testimony to get charges for her sister.
Or forensic interview.
To get charges for her sister, you should be able to use the same testimony to get charges for her. And so now we're looking at where he's charged across the board for the abuse, but no trafficking charges as of yet. Her mother is still free and roaming the streets. I don't know if she's, being sought after. I'm not sure. No one talks to us about that.
The initial call that you made to DCFS was for KM? Mm-hmm. Was it for her sister?
No, I don't.
Had anybody called DCFS for the sister?
Mm-hmm.
So, and had anything been done for the sister?
No, she was able to go and live with her dad, and that was the resolve.
So they have different dads.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's in a safer place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But this her dad's mother, and I've spoken with the sister, the dad, very close with the family. Her dad's mother reported concerns for KM and the sister when they were little girls. Little girls. We've tracked reports down and concerns all the way back to age 5 and 6.
Wow. Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get my thoughts back together. I'm sorry. Will you introduce yourself?
I'm Monica Michael.
Miss Monica,
And
how you doing? Thank you
I'm
for being
good.
here.
I am just a regular citizen, but it might be important for you to know that I have a case that is being investigated. So I have a case at Livingston Parish, and my experience is very different. I'm an alleged victim of another member of the Mack family. I have a case that is being investigated by the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office. So it's not my experience that if things are turned over to them, that they don't get investigated. So when I was listening to the story today, I thought, did someone turn it over? Because when my case is there, it is being investigated. So, of course, I can't talk about that because those things are pending, but I did want to appear and put that on the record.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jackson.
Let me ask you, your name is, I'm sorry.
Monica Michael.
Okay, Mrs. Michael. When, without talking about any particulars, I understand it's currently being investigated. When was your case turned over?
I went into the sheriff's department in January, so they have been investigating it since
When
then.
did we start meeting?
It's a case that happened, of course. I was a child when
No,
the
I understand,
victim,
but you're
when it
just
went-
coming.
right.
You came in January. When was your first time appearing before us?
Was that in November?
November. See, that's the difference between what you're hearing now and
Right.
what you're experiencing.
Okay.
The issue and with whatever's going on in Livingston Parish came out in November in this committee, and that's, I believe, when Mrs. Porter and others went to the state police regarding Livingston Parish, and I'm glad to see that as a result of this, and because this is what we like to hear. And we like to hear that as a result of someone coming forward in this committee, something different is occurring now.
Yes, Senator, and it is because of Miss Porter and my seeing her testimony and things on television with the girls. The girls are what inspired me to come forward with my story because of Miss Porter's plea on television, desperately asking for help. And so I felt compelled to come forward, being, a victim or alleged victim of the same family.
Why do you, and I have to ask
Yeah,
this,
please.
why do you call yourself an
That's
alleged
right.
victim if you know what happened to you?
Well, I am trying not to assume that a person is guilty without having a fair investigation and a trial. So I am not an alleged victim. I am a victim.
Right,
But the
that's
person
what I'm
has not
saying.
been charged.
Yeah, I don't think you have to assume anything when it happens to you. You're not the court and you're not the jury.
Thank
You're
you.
the victim.
Thank you.
And I want to always say that to people, when the court assumes innocence into proving guilty. If somebody abuses me, you're guilty the moment you start abusing me. Because as a victim, I've experienced it, and I don't have to go through a court. I don't have to go through a trial. I don't have to go through testimony. I was there. You lived it.
Thank you,
And,
Senator.
yeah, you lived it. And so I don't ever want you to place yourself in a position where because of what the law says that they have to be protected, that you can't state your truth because you don't have to protect the person that abused you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Well, that is my truth. So my truth is that I am a victim, and I did come forward because of the girls and because of Miss Porter's plea.
And it's like Senator Mizell said, that at some point we know something good has to come out of what has happened. And I think your testimony at the end of a drooling committee is like a breath of fresh air, that we're seeing something produce out of what happened that was so bad.
Yes, ma'am. I'm also hoping that if there are other people by my coming forward, when they see other people, could also come forward if they can also help these girls. It's one of the, I mean, I know that you all have been listening to it, but it is one of the most heartbreaking things I think that I have ever heard described. And as a citizen of this state, it breaks my heart because I think we're better than that.
We are better than that. I thank you for your courage to come forward because it's not easy. Because there are people that would criticize you because you waited, quote unquote, so long. But you have been victimized and you have been able to rise despite the hurt, the anger, probably suppression of what happened to you. But you're here today, and we want to thank you for doing that. We want to thank you for doing that because hopefully it gives others courage. Now, what does alarm me is I hear a similar name, and that's alarming to me. And I know you can't talk about the case, but I hear the name again.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm not sure if it's the same family member, but
It's a different family member, but it's the same name. And I really do thank you for what you're saying. And I understand that the average age of a victim that will come forward after having this happen to them in their childhood is like 52 years old.
Wow.
So I am 55. So I am.
you don't look a
higher-
girl.
I'm higher than the average age.
You look good.
But it is not easy to come forward. And you do know that it's a unique kind of crime because it's one of the only crimes where the victim is put through the ringer,
That's right.
you know. So you do know when you come forward what you're about to face. And it really does tear your family apart when it's, you know, when that is happening because everyone's veracity is called into question.
Yes.
Everyone is going to, you know, you don't perceive it correctly or you're a liar. But I do think that it's people like LaToya. I think that those girls also are very brave. I find them inspiring, and I'm hoping that other people also find them inspiring, and that something good can be made of this.
I think it does because I'll tell you what, most of the time, even in your 50s, the person who did this is in their 60s or 70s and they're still doing this.
And it looks to me as if they just go right on and live their life as if nothing ever happened and everything
Well,
is
they just
fine.
find a new victim. And that's another thing they do. And that's why you see, if you look at the arrests that's happening on this, you see older and older gentlemen being arrested and women for this. Because they go from victim to victim because they're allowed to get away with it. So I don't care what age you are. When you finally tell your story, I just believe you pull someone off the street that is going to destroy other young ladies' lives. And so I don't care how old it had to be for you to tell your story. You know, look at the Mr. Mack that's arrested. He was how old?
70-something.
70-something years old. So let's say that he had a 10-year-old victim. That person would have been 65 now. And even if they would have come forward, they would have been able to help these young ladies we're talking about 10 or 15 years ago. What I'm finding is that child sex predators have no age limit on when they stop. They just continue to go till somebody speaks their truth. And so they'll be in their 70s and 80s still abusing girls under 18. So I would encourage women everywhere, if something has happened, speak out. I don't care how long ago it's been because you don't know what child they're now taking advantage of. And you're helping to stop that cycle. So I thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Senator Mizell.
Thank you, ma'am. I just wanted to say I hope you all both understand you've given a voice to people who've had no voice. And I know it's not easy, and you've been demonized, and
I'm on my way.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I hope you know the good thing you've done, because otherwise we'd never know the story. Right. We'd never know the story if you hadn't had the courage to step up. And that's the only way we can try to right all the things that have been apparently done that none of us are happy about. So
I appreciate all of you. I appreciate what you're saying, Senator Mizell, and it is why I came today.
Thank
because
you.
This doesn't do anything for my case or not, but I want to do whatever I can to help what your efforts are to address multiple systemic failures, communications, whatever it is, so that the system didn't fail me. I didn't come forward. When I did, the system is working for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I can,
as women,
I remember
we
when I
often
was that
fail
age,
each
though.
other.
Right.
We don't lift each other up. We make excuses for why their story isn't as solid as we'd like it to be. Where we all walk the same shoes. I mean, we've all been through. So anyway, I appreciate y'all being here. And I know you've waited all afternoon.
I really look forward to coming back to see what sort of things you all find out about why, like what are the failures? and and how are we going to address those? So thank you so much.
Well, certainly we definitely are not stopping until we definitely get to the bottom of this case, and then doing everything we can to make sure that no other child goes through this, because no other child deserves this. Nobody deserves this, right? Nobody deserves this. No, nobody. Yeah. But Mr. Porter, I do want to thank you once again. Certainly, you have endured a lot, still enduring a lot, for doing the right thing. But I am convinced, and this is what I do know. I know God does not miss anything. And so your work is certainly not going unnoticed. And and I don't know, I'm not going to say the end, because everything has an appointed time. But at the right time for you, you will be fully restored. And everything that the enemy has taken from you will be given back.
I believe
In
that.
Jesus. Yeah, we do. Because you've done the right thing.
I believe that.
You've done the right thing. And I know it's been tough. I know you have tough days. Because you had the courage to step out and to do what was right. For KM, she can't be here, but I hope she knows that there are people that are fighting for her and defending for her to be able to go to the university of her choice, Spelman University. And I'll tell you, I'm going to do everything I can possibly to help her get there.
Yeah.
You just said a women's conference.
And she will do really well on that.
Is there anything else that you ladies want to share? And I do take your advice, Senator Jackson, the next time we have a committee hearing, which will probably be after session. We will take our guests first.
On the continuous thing,
Yes.
Because
Oh, hold up.
I just only make that request on continuous agenda items.
Yes.
Because, and please get your cards in when you're here, when you get here, because I would like to see, every time we come, we get one set of testimony, then you tell your story, and we're asking it months later.
Yeah.
So we're in a 3-month phase of not being able to meet unless something happens. But in that first phase, I would just like to see on the continuous docket, and y'all gonna see me run out of here because I've pushed back a legal meeting for like the last 3 or 4 hours. That's why you kept seeing me pop up and pop back down. But this is what we do every day, and this is important. But just on the continuous cases, I think we should, see them first.
Duly noted and shall be done. Any additional comments?
No, ma'am. I just appreciate you guys' time and all of your hard work, too. I know that you guys are fighting for her just as much. So I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank y'all so much. Y'all have a wonderful weekend. Stay dry.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay warm.